Barry Chamish. Hopefully, we've got an uninterrupted show this week. Last week was a nightmare. Not just me, my guest was blocked. We didn't have a show, but I winged it. Now, this week, we've got Dr. Jonathan Levy. He is the legal representative for the Holocaust Victims Group. All right, that's enough. First of all, let's talk about the beatification of Pope John Paul. Paul VI. It happened on October 9th. About a year ago in Rome. To beatify means one hop, step, and jump from being a saint, from being St. Paul. Let's go through this. Who was Pope Paul VI? Jonathan?
Yeah, hey Barry, how are you?
Oh gosh, did you miss that intro?
I did. You were introducing Pope Paul VI.
No, I
was
not. I was introducing you.
Oh, well, Paul VI, also known as Cardinal Montini, who was related to the Borgia family, if you can believe that. Good Italian
not
boy.
Everyone. Oh, you know what? I'll let you go with that, okay?
Good
Borgia,
Italian
we'll
lad.
Get back to it later, all right?
Right. Well,
look, he was the Vatican Secretary of State who oversaw the rat lines funneling up to 100,000 Nazis to freedom. And he's now a saint. Let's go through this now.
Right. Well, he was the co-secretary of state. Of course, the way the Vatican is set up, you have a pope, but because the Vatican's very political, it has what's called a secretary of state. But in the post-war period, and after World War II, they sort of split that between a domestic secretary of state, I believe that was Tardini, and Montini, who was the secretary of state for external affairs. Very important post, second only really to the Pope after the Second World War. And one of Montini's jobs was to, as you say, oversee the rat lines, which were the basically the smuggling. The purpose of the rat lines, kind of a prosaic term, was to smuggle Nazis and fascists and all sorts of people out of Europe. Just ahead.
By the way, why did they do this? Look, I can say right now.
Well, why those were good Catholics, Barry. Good Catholics who were just spreading the word. That's why they wanted them out. There was also a lot of money at stake. I mean, what other reasons do you need?
Well, just to get your co-ideologists out, I guess. All right, just shut them up. That's a real good answer.
Right, well, I mean, they had a lot of good operatives there. I mean, you had Hungarian fascists, Romanian fascists, Yugoslavian fascists, German Nazis, of course, French fascists, you name it. Italians, of course. Everybody who needed to get out, the way out was through the Vatican rat line. And the reason was, of course, the Vatican has a finger in the migrant business, just as it does now. Same organization called Caritas existed back then, was the Franciscan order, printed up paperwork, stateless person papers, all sorts of things, Red Cross paperwork, to get people out of Europe and over to friendly places.
They had a factory going, all right? They had
They did. They did have a factory going. How did you know that? They had the Franciscan order had a printing press, printing stuff night and day in Italy, fake paper to get people over to Spain, Portugal, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, wherever. And, of course, Muslim fascists were sent over to the Middle East, to Lebanon, Syria, Egypt.
Really?
Well, of course, they had Muslim fascists. You remember the Grand Mufti who went over and was an ally of Hitler, Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who, of course, isn't that Yasser Arafat's great-grandfather or something? Grandfather? You tell me, right? And I think that's in the Arafat family. The Grand Mufti was a buddy of Himmler and Hitler, and helped set up a Muslim SS division called the Handschar Brigade, or Cutthroat Brigade, over in Bosnia.
The problem with that is you have to look at Israel and its ties to Eichmann and the transfer agreement. It gets real messy.
Yeah, well, anyway, part of the rat line sent Muslim fascists to the Middle East, and everyone else was, you could go to Spain, go to Portugal, and want to go a little further away, South America. So that's what they did, and they also moved a heck of a lot of gold and money and things like that. And that was
stolen from my people.
Well, it was stolen from everybody, Barry. Stolen from Serbs and Jews and Gypsies and whoever else. They had stolen money from national governments, and the idea, of course, was in Eastern Europe, you wanted to move that stuff out of there before the good bad old Joe Stalin got his hands on it. So they sort of had the blessing of some people in the MI6, and certainly James Jesus Angleton, Knight of Malta.
Oh gosh, we're getting into all kinds
he
of
was
areas
mixed up in
now.
there too, and the
You're
British
saying the CIA was involved in this?
Well, they were. It wasn't called the CIA then, but later became the CIA. And Donovan, of course, was a good Catholic who founded the OSS. So they were moving a lot of stuff out of Europe, and that was Montini. He was the main mover, and he did a very, very good job.
All right, that was Pope Paul VI.
Pope Paul VI. Now, I think he's being sainted.
Who's Montini?
Right.
He became...
Right. Montini and Paul VI are the same fella, and I really think he's being sainted for the work he did with the rat lines rather than as Pope, because he did Vatican II, and that's been kind of unpopular with Catholics.
That this was never exposed while it was going on. Okay, forget it. That's me talking. All right. So you're saying that the Vatican Secretary of State Montini, who became Paul VI, who became beatified last year, was a an accessory, all right, to...
After the fact. Because I don't really think he killed anybody. He just helped people who had killed millions of people escape justice, as well as their loot. That was really his job.
Well, let's try and keep this easy. You've got a difficult task, and I've been reading your notes. It really is difficult. But in short, Dragonovich, he was the visitator. Boy, these names that they come up with for posts for Croatian matters. He was the chief conductor of the Vatican rat line.
One of them. I mean, there were several, but Dragonovich. A lot of them were Croatians. Croatians had a lot of good aptitude there. You had some other. Obviously, there were other people involved, Franciscan order, but Croatians were big conductors on the rat line. They had a presence in Rome, and of course, the Croatians had a good reason for being involved there because they were facing execution by Tito. So everyone who had been in the Croatian fascist movement, allied with Germany, needed to get out, and they proved very useful in moving other people as well. But there were German clergy involved, Italian clergy, even Irish clergy. They were all conductors on the rat line, sort of like our Underground Railway, right? For the Civil War.
The big name Nazis went to South America via, you don't use the word Operation Paperclip.
No, that was the U.S. government's own rat line, and that was to cherry pick some of the real talent there, whether it was in murdering or scientific or whatever. That was how they moved people out to the U.S. and Canada and England and Australia. Different organizations.
Via the Vatican.
Via the Vatican, yes. I mean, because the Vatican had the ability to do the paperwork. That's right.
Well, more than the paperwork, they gave him a place to stay, nice monasteries. Well,
Well,
it
that's
wasn't
true. I mean,
just the.
I give you an example. Artukovich, who had been the minister of the interior of fascist Croatia, had a lot of blood on his hands. At least 500,000 Serbs and Jews in Roma and what have you. He went out through the rat line. They gave him fake papers. He stayed in Ireland for a while at a monastery, and then he was brought over to the U.S. Where he lived quite openly. Andreas Artukovich lived quite openly in Seal Beach, California, courtesy of the U.S. government. And every year, the congressman from there would pass a special bill for the guy to keep him from being deported. Now, eventually, when he was old and senile, the U.S. government sent him back to Yugoslavia to face in the 80s, to face a war crimes tribunal, and he died before trial. But that's what the U.S. does, They,
Well,
they use
that would be
right?
Pavlik.
Well, that was Artukovich. Now, Pavlich, who was head of Croatia in Bosnia during the Second World War, he was pretty much scot-free. He went to Paraguay for a while, went to Argentina, worked for Juan Perón, worked for Stroessner in Paraguay, worked for Franco in Spain as a security advisor, if you will. And the Yugoslavs sent an assassin after him, and he took a couple bullets, and he eventually died in the late 50s. Sort of like the Israelis with the Eichmann operation.
Yeah,
I
wasn't
Yugoslavs didn't want him back for trial.
I wasn't going to bring it up. The only Nazi Israel ever convicted of all the possible Nazis was Eichmann. He was kidnapped elaborately, kept in a soundproof box so he couldn't open his mouth, and supposedly he was executed. But
right.
One Nazi, that's all Israel could get.
Well, they had Demjanjuk, of course, and then of course they bowed the policy there and let him loose. I mean, Demjanjuk was guilty as sin, but because the evidence had come from the Soviet Union, they had to let him out.
Well, he wasn't convicted. The only one convicted was Eichmann. Of all the horrible, horrible criminals, only one was convicted.
No, that's correct. And the U.S., for all its so-called Nazi hunting, right? I think Artukovich, a senile old man, by the time they sent him back, was really the only major war criminal they ever extradited. They had a few little minor ones. Again, I think they sent some fascist clergymen back to Romania and stripped a few German the minor officials of concentration camp guards of their citizenship, but not much. The Demjanjuk case was supposedly the big one for the U.S. and of course they came after the people who had deported Demjanjuk to where do you go, Germany or Israel, what have you, and tried to disbar them. I mean, there is a big policy against exposing the rat lines and all of this.
Now, people, I know this is a bit complicated for most of you. All right, these are names from Eastern Europe and so forth, but you have to understand that the Vatican turned church property into a complex scheme involving deposits at the Vatican Bank to smuggle Nazis and fascists, but I'm concentrating on Nazis right now, out of Europe. Let's right. Expand on this.
Right, it's not really complex, Barry. The people smuggling is complex. The money laundering is not complex. If you needed to launder money after the Second World War, you had very few options. You could go to Switzerland, but the Swiss always charge a pretty steep premium on that, and they were under, as they always are, a little bit of scrutiny. Or you had the option to go into the Vatican Bank. Now, the Vatican had a sweet deal for money launderers, essentially meaning if you had dirty money, whether it was gold teeth from Auschwitz or whatever, gold bars or whatever you had, you go to the Vatican, you make a deal with them, and if you give a portion of that to the church, they're more than happy to launder that money through the Vatican Bank and then send it to Switzerland. And in fact, that's the preferred way to do it. So very simple scheme. You turn dirty money into church money, and then you get a huge, you get your percentage back, which would be about 90% or so. And the church keeps 10%. That's just good business. And that's really what the Vatican Bank was set up to do.
Yeah, but 100,000 people is not just, your brother-in-law. You're smuggling him out. This is a major, major operation.
It was, but remember, they were printing the paperwork. They had organizations like Caritas, which, by the way, is a organization that exists today and is one of the prime movers of Muslim immigrants into Europe as well as illegal aliens into the U.S.
Explain that. I don't know this name.
Well, Caritas, I'm sure your listeners have heard of that. I mean, Caritas is a major Catholic charity that allegedly assists people, just like the organization in the U.S. Catholic Charities is the major provider of help for illegal immigrants. Caritas performs that same function worldwide, supposedly helping refugees. But what it really does is move people around at the behest of the Catholic Church. Now, why would the Catholic Church want to move hundreds of thousands of Syrians and Iraqis and Afghanis?
Let's answer why before we go into the details. Why did they do that?
What recently in Europe?
No! At 1946, 7, 8.
Why did they do that? Well, because they were paid to do it. That's why they did it. They had good reason to do it. Nobody does nothing for free. I mean, they could have moved just poor refugees, but they wanted to move instead fascists and Nazis and the like. So obviously there was money there.
I know this is a bit confusing, but we're talking about the likes of Klaus Barbie and Josef Mengele and Adolf Eichmann. I mean, these are big Nazis being, given freedom by the Vatican.
Right, Ralph, concentration camp commanders, all sorts of people. And a lot of them were then put in, just like with the refugees today in Europe, they were given gainful employment, by Egypt and Syria and places like that sometimes, or over in Argentina, helping in the security infrastructure, right? So there you go. The history repeats itself.
Nazis destroyed my entire community in Europe. They killed my family. 9 out of 11 members of my grandfather's family. It's personal here. Well,
you have my sympathy, but again, you have this nice smiling Pope Francis, who, of course, you got the other Pope who retired. The traditional Pope did an untraditional thing and retired. And of course, he didn't seem to die, did he? He's still there, Benedict, and. Guess he got blackmailed out, and you have this nice smiley Pope, and everybody loves him, right? Good guy, and of course it's just, two faces of the same monster, which is the Catholic Church.
Look, if the Catholic Church was exposed, and your people, by the way, are all probably dead by now, right? Retribution to who? Their grandchildren?
Well, the key here, Barry, is this. I mean, remember the Armenians. Now, you got to give the Armenians credit. They stuck with their business about exposing the genocide by the Turks, which started in the 1870s, by the way, up through 1917 or so. And they're still at it. The Armenians had finally got the Turks to admit a little bit here and there, and got history to change. Now, the same thing can happen vis-a-vis the Catholic Church. If we keep at them, might not happen this year, might not happen next year, but eventually, the curtain will fall, and people will see that the Catholic Church was behind a lot of nonsense there during the Second World War and in its aftermath. So eventually, if the will is there, things will be done.
The will. The will
unfortunately, the major Jewish
a generation ago.
Yes,
That's the whole
unfortunately,
problem.
and the major Jewish organizations are not our friends here. World Jewish Congress and those folks go and run the other way when you mention the Vatican.
Oh, gosh. Now, I should have had you on last week. Maybe you wouldn't have been interrupted, but the fact is we did a post-papal visit show. This after the high holidays that I was forced to take off, and it was going to be about the fiasco of the papal visit was such a front. But just briefly comment on what you saw with the Pope visiting, then we'll get back to your major thesis.
Well, okay. First of all, there's a few important things that people don't know about the Pope's visit. One, what type of vehicle was the Pope in, Barry?
I don't know. A Fiat?
A Fiat. Yes, that's right. And that major sponsor of the Vatican, I think they actually own the Vatican, is Fiat, owned by the Agnelli family. Right, who the Vatican Bank was also kind to hold all their shares, because, of course, Fiat was the major war criminal and collaborator with Mussolini. Somehow they came out of that smelling like a rose. Oh, of course. And of course, Mussolini had a fascist criminal or fascist syndicalist, economy, and Fiat was the major beneficiary of that. Somehow, all those Fiat shares emerged after the Second War, clean through the Vatican Bank, and the Agnelli family came out of there smelling like a rose, and of course, with the help of the Vatican. When I started my lawsuit against the Vatican Bank, their attorney at the time was Franzo Grande Stevens, who was also chief attorney for Fiat and the Agnelli family. It was all the same enterprise. So, number one, a lot of people don't realize the connection between Fiat, Agnelli family, and the Vatican. So that's one thing.
A lot of people, I'd say almost everybody. Look, you're going fast here, but you're doing a good job. Now, Fiat and ties to the Holocaust bothers me, and I'm not even going to jump into ties to Chrysler and what. It's too complicated, but the fact is you're claiming that Fiat had something to do with the death of my people in Europe.
Well, of course, Fiat was a major backer of Mussolini. Now, whether they committed genocide or not, I don't know, but they would have been an organization that should have been punished after the Second World War, but yet they come out dominating the Italian industry. And now, of course, they are in the U.S. with Chrysler. So, very important, the connection between Fiat and the Vatican, even to the point where they...
right? Jonathan, I hate to do this. We have to take 3 minutes off for commercials. We'll come back and you'll plug yourself and I'll plug me, and then we'll dive into this. I've been reading you today. It's very disturbing. Personally, it's very, very disturbing. We'll talk about this in 3 minutes. Don't go away. Folks, this is Barry Chamish. See you in 3.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com. FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Hey folks, this is Barry Chamish. I've got a good show, and a disturbing one, it really is. This is from an attorney, Dr. Jonathan Levy, who is suing on behalf of the Holocaust victims group, the Vatican, for stealing the money from their families to fund the rat lines. Look, first of all, you get all my books at lulu.com. That's www.lulu.com. There's a search box right in my last name, Chamish. Chamish. You'll get to my books. My website, thanks to David Samarin, is barrychamish.com. Plug yourself, Jonathan.
Right. Anyone who wants to get in touch with me can get in touch with me through our law firm website, which is brimstoneandcompany.com, BRIMSTONEAND company.com. And that's how you get in touch with me.
All right. Now, you've been, since 1998, it's a long time for a legal suit. You've been trying to get the Holocaust victims some retribution for the riches stolen from their families. But you're saying the Vatican in America is citing sovereign immunity, and it's working for them to prevent you from getting a fair settlement. Can you expand?
Yes, of course. Well, the Vatican never denied the allegations that it laundered money through the Vatican Bank. Well, of course, that's a fact. And it laundered, of course, money from the Second World War era as well. However, the Vatican claimed the Vatican Bank was immune because of sovereign immunity. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, which at the time had a majority of Catholics on it, it still does now, decided that's the case. You just can't sue the Vatican regarding stuff that happened over in Europe in the U.S. So we went over to the European Union. They're not much better, and we went through some rigmarole over there, and then they said, they threw up their hands and said, well, yeah, the Vatican uses the euro and stuff, but we can't really tell them what to do. So, not being one to give up, Barry, I said I filed a canon law petition with the Pope. And yours in Christ.
And you expected that to work, huh?
Well, I'm waiting for my response. It'll be a year, I think, in February, and we write them letters every few weeks. So eventually we'll get some kind of response out of the Vatican. We don't give up. And they had always, their attorney at one point told me, you need to take it to the Vatican. So that's what we've done. So that's where the case sits right now. And I fully expect the Vatican to hear that petition because, as it turns out, under canon law, you don't have to be a Catholic to file a canon law petition.
Oh, that's that's hair splitting. The point is, why would they want to turn themselves in?
Well, I don't know, but the Vatican does all sorts of strange things that you and I, mere mortals, can't fathom. Why did Pope Francis meet with homosexuals and apparently bless them, but at the same time bring in the clerk from Kentucky, the county clerk there, who was refusing to issue marriage license?
I'm not sure that's a major issue.
Yes, why does the Vatican do all sorts of strange things? We don't know.
Look, you're saying that the stolen loot, face it, mostly of my people. All right? There were Serbs, there were Croats, there were Hungarians, there were fascists, but mostly of my people went to fund the rat line.
There was some Jewish money there, but I got to tell you the truth. A lot of that money was in the form of money stolen from national banks throughout Europe that had been sent down there to the Vatican Bank as well. So huge amounts of gold reserves and things like that and were laundered through there. I mean, in the case of the Croatians, they drove 10 truckloads of loot down there with the help of the British. So,
all right,
who knows what...
I'm going to say right now, a very, very special report that I read today by William Gowan. You tell my listeners who William Gowan was and what he testified that Draganovic told him.
Draganovich. Well, William Gowan, and remember that name. In fact, both he and I will be on TV, hopefully, on Channel 5 in London in a few weeks, on a program called Conspiracy. They came out and interviewed us, and I'm not sure that we don't have a date yet for that program. I sure hope it doesn't end up on the editor's floor. But Bill Gowan, he's in his 80s now, and he was the youngest Secret Service, or he worked for the Counterintelligence Corps at age 17, was a special agent. Now, because he spoke fluent Italian, and his father, Franklin Gowan, also happened to be secretary to the U.S. mission to the Vatican.
That would help.
That helped. And, of course, he was related to the Philadelphia Gowans, who were multi-millionaires during the Gilded Age. But, he's a good guy. He investigated the Ustasha. He did all sorts of things. He earned the enmity of James Jesus Angleton, who was his lifelong enemy and tried to ruin him, because he, as a young fellow there, exposed all this stuff, almost put the pinch on Pavlich, infiltrated the Croatian monastery of San Girolamo in Rome, just outside the Vatican, and his reward was he was investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee.
Was he found guilty of anything?
Well, they tried to assassinate his character. They leaked information. They claimed that William Gowan was the one, and again, they claimed an 18-year-old was the one masterminding the rat lines, and leaked the information to Walter Winchell and Drew Pearson, who were the major journalists at the time. Who wrongly put out that information. How could an 18-year-old have been behind the rat lines? Not very likely. And that of course, was the invention of Angleton. We got the information under the Declassified Freedom of Information Act. We got the information from Congress, and they had investigated the guy. So
now Gowan was on trial in the mid-2000s. Vatican lawyers the works, and he didn't flinch.
Yeah, well, he was in his 80s already. Then he's still around, still very active, and the Vatican deposed him, and Francisco or Vatican bank attorneys deposed Bill Gowan for 4 days. He ended up in the hospital one night, and he said, "No, I'm going back to testify the next day," and he testified, and they could not break the man. They tried. They produced documents that were forged. They produced Jim Angleton's personal files without declassification stamps on them. All sorts of bizarre stuff. And they could not shake Bill Gowan from his testimony. So there's the witness. And, of course, that's why no one ever wants this thing to go to trial. Because we have the one live witness, thank God. But one day, maybe soon, maybe we'll get to go to trial. Who knows? But there's witnesses to this stuff. You and I, we don't make these things up. It's not
you and I
material.
Don't get our way. My goodness. Certainly those who were robbed should be... look, you're on the side of right here. All right? All right, I said that.
Right, but Barry, and this led to other cases. I mean, the Vatican has despoiled so many different groups of people. The Ethiopians were despoiled by Mussolini, 1935 to 1941. I'm working with them because artifacts stolen. I mean, the Italians went in, used poison gas in Ethiopia, blew up cultural monuments, killed 1 million people, public executions, burned people alive, and carted away entire monasteries, obelisks, this and that. And who does that remind you of? Oh, ISIS. That's right. And they were blessed by the Vatican, by the way. They thought they were going to Roman Catholicize Ethiopia, which was an Orthodox Christian, Muslim, and Jewish country at the time. And of course, the Vatican's never apologized for that. And a lot of the things that they stole are in the collections of the Vatican Museum and Vatican Library, if you can believe it or not.
Look, I'm not going to bring this up for too long, but Pope Benedict, who is alive, he retired from popehood, but he's living in the Vatican, volunteered for the Wehrmacht.
Well, he did. He is also homosexual.
All right, that's, I guess, to you, not a big deal. To me, it's huge.
Well, it is. He volunteered. He was a Hitler Jugend, and he said, all I did was man an anti-aircraft gun, right? But more significantly, he went on to be pope, and he got blackmailed out of the position, of course, because of his boyfriend.
How did they blackmail? I want to know this one. I've often asked that. How did they blackmail him out to resign?
Well, there was the question, of course, of his boyfriend, known as Gorgeous George, his secretary.
You think it was that?
I think that
was... He had a homo boyfriend.
It was that. Videotape, Barry, can work wonders. And I'm sure that's, with the advances in cameras, of course, a little pinhead camera there in the papal apartments, and we know someone had rifled his safe, and remember they locked the butler up in the Vatican basement for a while for having stolen some of the Pope's files. So I think they had the goods on Benedict, and it was just probably too much. So he had to retire, you see. The only Pope in history to retire turned out to be the Pope who claimed he was a traditionalist.
Well, he's still in the Vatican. You can ask him.
Well, he's still around, but he doesn't say too much now, does he? I think they did a pretty good number on him. But that's what happens when you don't bring in the security services to do a sweep of your apartment.
I'm not sure it was that. He had a background that no pope should have. No pope should be a Wehrmacht. Was he an officer or just a soldier?
No, he was in the Flak Corps. He was he manned an anti-aircraft gun. That was already known before they elected him pope. That wasn't.
So you can't winnow out a Wehrmacht soldier from the papal ranks. They don't check.
I thought that was one of the things on his resume that was in his favor.
Oh, really? All right. I'm going to let you explain this, but I disagree totally before you begin.
Well, what's that? I mean, certainly to hold office in Europe.
Volunteered for the Wehrmacht is in his favor?
Well, you could. Who was that? Mitterrand, who had been the president of France, had been a minister in the Vichy government in France, right? So was that Mitterrand? Yes, I believe so. So just having a background of fascism in Europe, I mean, that doesn't disqualify you from high office.
I'm not sure fascism and Nazism are net. Mussolini was not the same as Hitler.
Yeah, that's true, but you ask Bill Gowan, his grandfather was mistaken for a Jew and put on a train and deported and killed from Italy.
There's so millions of cases.
And so there were plenty of Italians. Just because they didn't make Italy Jewish free doesn't mean they didn't deport Italian Jews to Auschwitz. Just because France
there weren't many Italian Jews to begin with.
That's right, and the Vichy government in France was just because they weren't efficient didn't mean they weren't helping the Germans deport
Mussolini
Jews.
had Jewish lovers, and
but perhaps so. See, the dictator of Croatia was married to a Jew. His children were racially Jewish. That didn't stop him either from executing 30,000 Jews.
Did he?
Yes.
Oh, I want you to know how this information just stabs me more. All right, let's go on. I'm objective, remember? I don't get emotional about this stuff. But, okay, the leader of Croatia was married to a Jew.
Emotional here. It's just history and how things work. We see it repeating itself right now, all the time.
All right, let's do the deep background now. I saved this for last because I thought it was hardest. All right, why is this Vatican Bank cleanup? I've never heard of it, but you're saying it's a smokescreen. It must be a really good smokescreen. I've never heard of it.
The Vatican Bank cleanup? Well, that, of course, is the centerpiece of Benedict and now Francis's papacy. They've been cleaning the Vatican Bank up, if you want to believe them, for 5 or 6 years now. Now, how long could it take to clean the thing up? I had a client come to me, and he said, they closed my account at the Vatican Bank. And he wasn't a clergyman at all. He said, the order that I worked for had forced me to open an account at the Vatican Bank to avoid paying taxes in Italy. So they were using the Vatican Bank for all sorts of stuff. Don't think they cleaned anything up. The head of the Vatican, what is it called? The Vatican Financial Intelligence Unit. His name's Rene Brulhart. They do little puff pieces on him and things like Fortune magazine and places like that. He's been cleaning the Vatican up for 5-6 years. Now, The man won't even answer my letters. It's just ridiculous. So they're not cleaning anything up. They're cleaning out their political enemies. That's for sure.
Well, why should they answer your letter if it's just going to get them in trouble?
Well, if you were cleaning up the Vatican Bank, wouldn't you start with the old stuff first?
Okay,
right?
Then here's why it's a smoke screen. Okay, I got it. Look, oh gosh. Again, this is very disturbing to me, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think you're going to win. Look, I've been up against this with the former president of Israel, Shimon Peres. His ties to the Vatican are insane. He's literally an agent. Literally an agent.
Well, I don't doubt that. But remember, eventually these guys take themselves down. So you can't give up on these matters. That's the point. That's why we do ridiculous things like file petitions with the Vatican, because you just need to keep the cases alive, Barry. At some point, everything implodes, and the truth comes out. And
I don't think people get smarter. That's the real problem. You've got your peasant class worldwide who remain Catholics, won't believe this, won't want to believe it. It's really a brick wall you're running against.
Right. Well, when you're dealing with religion in general, it's a very dangerous thing. But religious movements do implode from time to time, and the Catholic Church is not immune from that. So,
well, I mean, you're representing now again the Gowan deposition. Also represents the Roma, or the Gypsies, essentially. They were also robbed blind. They want restitution. They're not going to get it any more than the Jews will get it.
Well, the Jews were supposed to get restitution, and they got robbed by the World Jewish Congress. There was a lot. There's been a lot of restitution paid, and a lot of Jewish organizations have soaked up the money.
Again, you made a major claim. How did they get robbed by their own organization?
Well, Mr. Bronfman headed that up sort of as his own
which
little
one?
deal.
Charles?
Edgar Bronfman, and where does the money go? And then there's the Claims Commission, and which is a non-profit organization set up in Israel and New York, and who the hell runs those things? Nobody knows where all that money goes. They don't even account.
To understand why this, all right, Bronfman. When I was young, I went out with his granddaughter. I mean, all these.
Did you? You should have married her. Then you wouldn't have to do a radio program.
She was too young then. But that's not the point. The point is it's all personal. This is my family being destroyed and my family, some surviving, and it's all in the family. And I take it very hard. Everything you say, I take hard.
Well, I don't know. We just have to hang in there. I know that you certainly have made just as much more difficult claims than I have in Israeli politics. I mean, that's even more difficult to deal with the Vatican.
You know what? When I discovered the Paris connection to the Oslo peace accords and how it was all tied up with the Vatican, the accord with the Vatican was signed 2 weeks after the accord to let the PLO back into Israel. It's all the Vatican, was all Paris. That's what I discovered.
Right.
That's my discoveries as a journalist.
Right. Well, I think you'll agree the Vatican's long-term position in the Middle East is they want extraterritoriality in Jerusalem. They want that status where they are the protectors of their holy sites. They want sovereignty there in Jerusalem. That has
Terrorists
always been the Vatican's position.
proposed 63 hegemonist sites across Israel handed over to the Vatican immediately. If you look, okay, I'm not going into this.
And they have an agreement with the Palestine Authority. Why do you think the Vatican recognized you know about that? They recognized the Palestine Authority as sovereign, way before everyone else. Because they have a secret agreement with the Palestine Authority to take sovereignty over certain holy sites.
I'm going to say it again, my poor people, we somehow won't awaken, and what's coming isn't good. That's that. I'm going to, no, plug yourself one last time. I want people to get a hold of you.
Well, Barry, people can do a search for me, Dr. Jonathan Levy, Levy, brimstoneandcompany.com. We do a lot of interesting legal cases, and if somebody has something, they're free to get in touch with me.
I'm going to say what I said before. What you say to me is very, very personal. And it's very difficult, and I'm tired of life, I gotta tell you. Let's face it, 6 million Jews were murdered in Europe, 100,000 survived. Let's get to the core of the matter here.
That's right, and the Vatican was an accessory to that, both before, during, and after the fact. There's no question. There's no question there's been plenty of books and apologies written for Pius XII and Pius XI and Paul VI.
Us guys, and I'm not alone, by the way, other Jews have woken up and found out that Israel was not founded on the good of Jews, was founded on the back of the deaths of Jews in the Holocaust.
They did, and ultimately, they've been successful, Barry. What have they done? They've almost chased all the Jews out of Europe, which really was the homeland of Jews, and concentrated them in Israel. Maybe not a good
thing.
They
didn't. There were none left. There were 500,000 Jews from Hungary alone murdered.
That's right, and so I would say they've been pretty successful.
Oh gosh.
Dr.
Levy, you are such an optimist, and you're looking at someone who's really sinking into deep pessimism. But to my listeners, Dr. Jonathan Levy is the legal representative for the Holocaust Victims Group. And if anyone has a right to be optimistic, it's Jonathan Levy. There, I said it.
That's right. Well, I'm optimistic we'll win our case, but how that's going to happen is, I don't know at the moment.
Well, 1998.
The main thing is keep it going.
Is 18 years. It's not an overnight case.
No.
Oh, gosh. Jonathan, we had a great interview. Coming up, it's Janet Phelan. And I want to thank you, Jonathan. You were very, very patient with me.
Well, thank you so much.
I'm losing my patience.
Good to see you in good form, Barry. Always a pleasure.
We'll see you soon, Jonathan. And listeners, I'll see you in 7 minutes with Janet Phelan. Don't go away. Come back in 7.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit DiscountGoldAndSilverTrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings and to his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation under Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. A top general is telling lawmakers that President Obama should rethink his plan to reduce the number of U.S. personnel in Afghanistan to about 1,000 by the end of next year. General John Campbell, the top commander of U.S. and allied forces in Afghanistan, told a Senate panel Tuesday that he has provided his superiors with many other options because conditions in Afghanistan have changed. He also said an American airstrike on a hospital in northern Afghanistan was a mistake that took place despite rigorous procedures designed to keep something like that from happening. A conservative military watchdog hopes the Secretary of Defense will do the right thing when it comes to the issue of women in frontline combat.
During a recent news conference, Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter promised to carefully consider the quality of information and analysis behind the recommendations the military service leaders will submit to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff regarding the women in combat issue. The Defense Secretary will make final determinations based on those recommendations sometime before January of 2016. Elaine Donnelly is president of the Center for Military Readiness. She has released the second part of a report on the results of an extensive study conducted by the Marine Corps. She hopes Carter pays attention to the findings.
The new data shows that units that were all male compared to the gender-integrated ones had more strength, endurance, speed, and accuracy, and rates of injury usually less than half those of women. To ignore that kind of data and instead pursue gender diversity metrics and quotas really makes no sense. It's an affront to the troops, to both men and women.